A gloved hand lifts a pocket compass out of damp seaweed. The glass is cloudy, salt-crusted along the rim. The needle does not scan. It sits, stubborn as a memory, fixed to the same inland direction no matter how I tilt it. Why will it not turn? Listen closely now. This is where the story begins.
Find somewhere dark. Put your headphones on if you have them. If you want the full picture, stay with me in the quiet. I'm Sam Nong, and this is Nature's Dread. Tonight's story is called Lodestone Ledger. The person who found the first one is an ordinary volunteer named Mara. She spends her Saturdays clearing geocache sites and tidying rack lines on a stretch of coastline where dunes meet scrub. Her boots smelled of peat and cold ocean. Her hands reddened from wind. She believes in small routines. Collect, catalog, leave the place a little cleaner than she found it. That morning, she lifted 3 compasses from a tangle of driftwood and a 4th from a cache hidden under a rock. Objects that should have been dead simple to read, but which carried a quiet, unsettling sameness.
The first compass, she turned it over on the hood of her car, the metal clinking. It was old, brass, glass scuffed, the cardinal marks faded. Mara checked it against the little map in her glove compartment. Normally, a needle tosses a quick apology and finds magnetic north. This one apologized with silence. She shrugged. Maybe it had been magnetized in someone's pocket. Maybe a cheap mechanism. Maybe corrosion had glued the needle. She told herself all the sensible things people tell themselves when the world is trying to be mysterious.
She pocketed the compasses anyway, not because she expected a mystery, just because they were there. Over the next weeks, more turned up, snagged on a dune fence, tucked inside a geocache, cradled in a peat hollow beneath a boardwalk, pulled free from a wrecked skiff along the high tide line. Each face was different, each case a different brand and era, but the needles, when she placed them beside a measured map, kept pointing toward the same inland azimuth. It was a pattern that began as curiosity and then settled into a kind of slow, attentive dread.
She did what anyone who knows the value of records would do. She cataloged them. Date, location, broad, anonymized descriptions, never exact coordinates. Condition, a photograph taken from a safe distance. She annotated each entry with the needle bearing she observed, careful to note that she was not turning or testing the instrument, only recording the face as found. It's an important distinction. If you ever find something like this, please do not handle it further. Photograph from where you stand and contact local authorities or a qualified conservator.
At first, the expert she called in offered patient, technical answers. A materials conservator suggested corrosion could bias a needle. If rust forms asymmetrically, it can drag. A maker of precision instruments pointed to manufacturing tolerances and magnetic hysteresis, the way a thin film of magnetization can make a needle stick on one bearing. A search and rescue coordinator reminded her that occasional artifacts, old survey markers, buried metal, even a lone horseshoe, can skew local readings, and that SAR teams treat such anomalies as curious but rarely conclusive until they fit a broader pattern. But patterns are slippery. When several compasses from different places, different decades, and different manufacturing histories all point to the same azimuth, that's not just an artifact of one rusted spring. That's where a narrative begins to gather weight. And so the inquiry deepened from what broke this needle to what is the land saying, if anything at all. I spoke with a geophysicist named Dr. Imara on the phone. She explained crustal remnant magnetization, essentially how ancient events can lock a tiny local compass of magnetism into rock. She mentioned iron ore seams, glacial deposits rich in magnetite, human-made groundworks, anything that concentrates natural magnetism. She was careful, measured. She emphasized caveats. Rocks can carry a signature, yes, but to argue that a landscape willed a bearing would be poetic, not scientific. Still, she leaned toward curiosity.
If compasses across varied contexts freeze to the same inland azimuth, the first step is a careful transect with a magnetometer, not a headline, she told me. We map anomalies. We look for consistency. The conservator, Mara was told, cautioned about corrosion-induced bias. Metal fatigue, pitting, tiny magnetic particles embedded in a pivot, these things make a needle lie. Conservators test components under controlled lab conditions and never recommend field remagnetization or home tinkering. The message came through plain. Don't poke at what's already delicate. You risk erasing the very clues you hope to read. And then, an inflection point. A family recognized a photograph Mara posted, an image of a compass face that matched one their grandfather carried for decades. They reached out privately and asked, "We have the old stories. We have his journal. Can you tell us where that one was found?" Suddenly, the catalog shifted from an inventory into a potential thread connecting objects to people and stories. Whom do you tell when an item might matter to a family or to an investigation? How do you preserve context without opening a door to trespass or contamination? Mara found herself sitting on the bench under a lamp, holding the phone, trying to decide. This was no longer just curiosity. This was responsibility.
She reached out to the local SAR coordinator. He explained the thresholds. If an object plausibly relates to a missing person report, if the find circumstances point to an ongoing safety concern, then the chain of custody matters. SAR teams and law enforcement will collect, catalog, and secure potential evidence. If not, the safer course is to document, leave in place, and consult agencies before removal. He repeated something that stuck with Mara. Evidence is fragile. Context is everything.
And because this story is part science and part attention, they organized a field test. Pre-dawn, the team assembled. Mara, the geophysicist, the conservator who handled displacement protocols, and a couple of volunteers. They moved silently across a cold landscape, lanterns and headlamps throwing long, wary shadows. A handheld proton magnetometer hummed when it turned on, a soft mechanical insect song. I want you to picture that sound, a steady, low hum under the breath of the morning. The air was thin with salt and peat. Breaths came fogged and quick in gloves. This is where the procedure grew ritual-like, methodical steps to avoid introducing magnetism from tools or even keys on belts.
They placed a trusted control compass on a non-metallic surface and watched it find north obediently. Then, beside it, they set one of Mara's compasses. No touch, no adjustment. The control steadied. The found compass did not. When the magnetometer traced a line across the transect, it showed a local anomaly. Small, focused. Not the kind of broad boon you'd expect from a magnetic mountain, but meaningful. The needle resisted true north, as if it remembered another rule. There is a strange animal of a feeling when instruments disagree. Science prefers disagreement. It forces us to refine, to ask better questions. But here, the disagreement introduced stakes. Was this a natural magnetic patch, locked in bedrock or peat? Was there a buried cache of something ferrous? Or had human hands, over decades, left a breadcrumb trail, relics placed and forgotten, binding instruments to stories not yet told? The team recorded the anomaly, carefully logged each observation, and, following the conservator's advice, did not remove the objects from the field, except under controlled conditions.
Back in the lab, tests peeled back possibilities. Microscopic corrosion patterns suggested long-term exposure to salt and oxygen, expected for shoreline finds. But those patterns couldn't, on their own, explain the consistent azimuth across inland, peat, and shoreline contexts. The geophysicist's map suggested a shallow stretch of magnetic-bearing till under a swath of the landscape. The conservator reminded everyone that even sediment chemistry could bias small metal needles after long exposure. So the answer kept folding in on itself. Plausible explanations, each with caveats, none wholly satisfying.
The community debated how much to publish. An open data set of bearings could help other researchers, but it could also enable triangulation, lead curious visitors to remote sensitive sites, and disturb potential evidence. Mara advocated for restraint. She argued that stewardship meant protecting places as much as it meant telling stories. They anonymized locations, shared general findings with academic partners, and included a clear safety note. Do not remove or magnetize found compasses, photograph from a safe distance, and contact the proper authorities.
There's a moment in every field story where wonder and duty intersect. For Mara, that moment came when the family who had recognized the compass accepted the anonymized summary. They wrote that they felt seen, and that was a fragile human reward. But there was also a lingering ache. Someone had lost a person, or a place held a memory, and compasses, small, functional devices, had become pages in a ledger none of them had intended to keep.
And the final image that returned again and again was simple and stubborn. A wooden bench under a lamp where Mara spread out the compasses she had found. Brass and glass, plastic housings dulled by peat and salt. Dozens of faces, each telling a different small story, all pointing the same way. It was beautiful and unnerving. It begged no tidy answer. The instrument seemed to be keeping a record of landscape, of time, or of human habit, and perhaps all three at once.
So what do you do when the land, metal, and memory converge? You record carefully. You consult experts. You protect context. You temper curiosity with stewardship. And you tell the story in a way that honors the unknowns. In technical terms, the most responsible conclusion the team reached was cautious. A localized magnetic anomaly likely contributed. Corrosion and manufacturing variants could bias needles, and human movement of objects complicated the pattern. None of it proved anything grand. No supernatural lodestone, no decisive forensic link. But the ledger remained. The compasses had kept their bearings, and in doing so, they'd asked us to pay attention.
Before we go, a few practical notes I promised earlier. If you find a compass or any object in the wild that seems out of place, do not handle it more than you need to. Do not attempt to magnet test it with household magnets or tools. Photograph it from a safe distance, note general location and conditions, and contact park staff, local authorities, or a qualified conservator. If you're a trail steward or volunteer, coordinate with agencies before moving items that could be part of a broader puzzle. Curiosity is a gift. Stewardship is its guardrail.
And for the curious mind that wants more, if you enjoy puzzles at the edge of science and story, where objects behave like witnesses and landscapes archive memory, there are threads here worth following. Geomagnetism, remnant magnetization, sedimentology, conservation ethics. They're technical, but they're also human. They teach us how to read silence, how to weigh a pattern without forcing an answer.
On the bench, under the lamp, the compasses still point in that same inland direction. No one can say with certainty whether the land fixed them, rust claimed them, or human hands nudged 1,000 tiny decisions into the ledger. Maybe the truth lives in all of that at once. Maybe it waits. Either way, notice the silence the compasses leave behind. Notice how it asks you to listen.
If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And until next time, check the corners.